The Crucible project was truly a breakthrough for me that had me looking deeper into my life. And then as a result, I started to transform rather than transfer some of these things that I had been dealing with.
Welcome to the Crucible Project podcast. The Crucible Project is a nonprofit organization committed to creating a world of men and women who live with integrity, grace, and courage, helping them to fulfill their God-given purpose. This podcast will discuss important and sometimes difficult topics while delivering practical life applications with men and women who are currently practicing this work. We are igniting Christ-like change in men and women through experiences of radical honesty and grace.
Welcome back to the Crucible Project podcast. I'm your host for today, Joy Dunning, and today I'm here with our friend Kenny Cox. We are going to be jumping into a few different topics. We're going to unpack a bit of Kenny's story and talk about something that's very near and dear to his heart. So before we get going, Kenny, why don't you jump in? Hey, how you doing today?
I'm good, Joy. Good morning. I'm enjoying the North Country that I'm in now. Usually I'm in Florida this time of year, but it's not in the minus 20s, which is a good thing. So I love nature, and so I am always happy when I'm a little to the north of you.
Yes. Well, good. I'm glad that you're in your happy place here this morning. So, Kenny, why don't we jump in? And if you could tell me a little bit about yourself, what life looks like for you right now, like maybe just a snapshot of what your everyday is.
Sure. Yeah. So I am a business owner. I've got a few different businesses, and my wife and I now split time between Florida and then this property that we have up here in Wisconsin crosses over the Michigan border. We have a hunting retreat that we own up here. And so I'm in a really cool phase of life in which I have this nice rhythm of I don't have to stay up north in the cold weather all the time. And then I spend a lot of time in Nashville these days too, because we just had our second grandchild. So we've got that cool phase of life going on as well. So, and so outside of business, ever since, getting engaged with the Crucible Project and them running my retirement plan, I am now very focused on the Crucible Project and the transformative work that it does to the minds and hearts of others in this world. And so I've been a board member here, for probably close to 7 or 8 years now. I am a weekend retreat leader, and then I'm also certified in some other areas of our work as well. And then I've also gotten engaged with an organization called Shadowworks, which has really helped me. I've become a certified coach and certified a certified leader in that organization as well. And so that's very much been aligned with the Crucible Project and helped me in the work that we do here too.
Very cool. Yeah. Well, bless you for the work that you're doing. My apologies for your retirement. And we can unpack that actually in just a few minutes here. But before we jump into current application of things, I'd love to go back to where you got involved with Crucible and what your soul work journey has looked like. So when did you go on your initial weekend?
So I went in June of 2013 down in Dixon Valley, one of the worst retreat locations that we've ever used.
Well, that's how you know you're really in it and you really want it, when you're willing to go to Dixon Valley, Illinois.
Right.
No shade at Dixon, but So, all right. So what was life like going into the weekend? It seems like some people come into the weekend in the midst of crisis. Some, like myself, it was just what I'm doing is working, but I feel like there's more. There's more for me in life than the wake up, do what I can, go to bed, wake up, do what I can, go to bed. So I wanted to interrupt that pattern a bit. How about for you? What was your draw into the weekend?
Yeah, so mine was really multifaceted. I had done quite a bit of work leading up to the Crucible Project, counseling. I had done counseling. I had done the Cloud and Townsend Ultimate Leadership Program. I was in spiritual formation at the time. I had been divorced in '02, if I recall correctly. And so in divorce, that was an extremely transformative event in my life. And I'd received Christ into my life after that. And then that wound up leading to another tragedy as well in '04. And so all of this in the midst of me receiving Christ in my life and doing a lot of deeper soul work types of dives. And so I wound up joining a divorce recovery at Willow Creek Church. And then later I wound up leading, I think '05 to 2010, I wound up leading a divorce recovery ministry at Willow Creek's Crystal Lake location. And so during that run, I had a table leader, coach, who kept recommending that I do the Crucible. And at the same time, I had a life coach who was recommending that I do the Crucible. And so it was one of those moments where it was like, okay, God, I get it.
Yeah.
You're teaming up on me between you and these other two individuals to go on this weekend, and I trust these people. And so I think that they all knew that I wanted something different for myself, and figured because I'm a quester type of individual, novelty seeker, that I would be open to a challenge. And with trusting them, I went on this weekend. And I had all of these things in my life that were going well. I wound up getting remarried to a wonderful individual. My wife's name's Kim, and she's just brought such joy and balance into my life. And so here that was going great. Business was going well. And yet the divorce and then the tragedy that happened within my family, which I've spoken about on another podcast, all led to, this opportunity to go even deeper. And so I went on a Crucible Project weekend. And I on that weekend, I was really able to reconcile some of the deeper things that I held anger about. And I really started to look at who I was as an individual. And I'm like, man, I am angry all the time at the different things that happen. And the individuals on that weekend showed me first that it was safe, that they could hold my anger. And then two, how to transform my anger, how to create tools around it. And so that's been a journey for me, and I think will be a lifelong journey ultimately. But that weekend was extremely transformative, and being through transformative programs, in like such as the Cloud and Townsend, or even spiritual formation, the Crucible Project was truly a breakthrough for me that had me looking deeper into my life. And then as a result, I started to transform rather than transfer some of these things that I had been dealing with.
That's really good. Yeah. So you came out of your weekend, and since then, like you said, you've been involved in pursuing certifications, getting deeper and deeper involved in the organization. You've been at the helm of, helping our board lead and set direction, and really make sure that Crucible is heading in a direction that is God honoring and Christ centered. And so thanks for your investment in all of that. But part of that is, and part of what we're going to talk about today is, you read a book, right? You read a book that changed things for you, you said?
Correct.
All right. So why don't we jump into talking about that? So the title of the book is Gospel Patrons. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the book?
Yeah, so I was introduced, just for a bit of history on this, I was introduced to the book and to John Reinhardt, the author, by the chairman of my board, John Sleeting. John actually did a Crucible weekend here just over a year ago. And so John Sleeting has really been a financial mentor to me. And he also has been an advocate, like having a personal chief financial officer. And so he understands the importance of giving, which is a big part of who, my wife and I are. And so he introduced me to the National Christian Foundation, which they have a vehicle called a donor advised fund that you can structure so that all of your giving comes out of one location. But you can also take appreciating assets, and instead of writing a check to, for taxes, then that appreciating asset gets put into a donor advised fund more on a tax-free basis. And then those upsides from that appreciation are now able to be given away to causes in which you believe in. And so that's the little history on John Sleety and what he's provided for me on this giving side. So he took me to he gave me an invitation for my wife, my daughter, and I to go to a national Christian Foundation event in which John Reinhardt was speaking. So I had a chance to meet John Reinhardt at that point. And I'd been reading his book, and I'd been really looking more deeply at the history of Christianity when it comes to gospel patrons, those individuals that stand out, that come alongside of ministry leaders, church leaders. And what I really recognized was that it was pinging my heart, because gospel patrons, they go after diseases. They don't just, simply treat symptoms. And the disease is not drugs or politics or capitalism or religion. The disease is, as we talk about in our Crucible experience, is that we have a shadow that separates us from God. And God sent his son Jesus to help cure the disease of humanity. And understanding that the true diagnosis and remedy that leads to this answer is Jesus. And it really doesn't matter who we are, whether we run a company, whether we lead a department or answer the phone. Our mission is all the same: to advance the message of Jesus, who are going to save those who are lost, who's going to bring an awakening and reconciliation. And so, to me, transformation of the heart and minds of others is key. Mm. And so when you look at gospel patrons, these are people with high net worth all the way down to very low socioeconomic levels. And it's not about the size of their checks. It's about whether they're living in a mission for their unique calling, and they're bringing their time and their talent and their treasures forward in what they're doing. And so that's really the message to me of what is a gospel patron. It's that person who brings their time and their talent and their treasures to a ministry, to an organization. Now, you can give, individually, without any thought. Just believe in something and give, and that's great. But I think when it comes to personal transformation in life, when you bring yourself, your whole self, that's the important element that winds up leading to an individual feeling fulfilled and then becoming a gospel patron. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. The thing that you said that really stood out is that it's not about the size of the check. I think so many times it's easy for people to say, well, I'm barely making ends meet, and who am I to give? My $5 isn't going to impact anybody, so I might as well hold on to it. But at the end of the day, it's about living in their mission. So, I know you've been very involved in Crucible, and we have second level weekends. One of them is specifically focused around life mission and purpose. So I'm curious, do you have a life mission statement that, whether it's from that weekend or just in general, that helps guide and direct you in this gospel patronage that you embark on?
Yeah, it's a good question. Let's, and as many times as I recite it, it'll be interesting when I wasn't ready to share it, whether I can remember it or not. So I'll at least give you because I live by it. So even though it may not be exact, this is what I live by. Through my brokenness and ability to incarnate with others, I encourage healing, meaning, purpose, and legacy.
That's beautiful. Wow. Incarnate with others. That's a really cool way of summarizing the idea of just being with people. And, Kenny, if there's one thing I know about you, is that you do that really well, being with others. So let's talk about your gospel patronage. So what stood out to you about it that made you say, this is what I want to be about, and this is where I'm going to hitch my wagon?
Yeah, so being a gospel patron to the Crucible the Crucible Project was really easy, because I went through a life planning, and if anyone has not been through one, they're phenomenal. So it's a strat op for your life, and really unpacked who I am, who my values are, how my leadership wiring works. And then I started I have, at the end of that process, you come up with a life perspective filter. And so you take into consideration in that life perspective filter, your story and all of these different elements of who you are. And it allows you to run through there, any endeavor, any ministry, job, whatever it is, and to be able to look at it comprehensively as it aligns with who you are. And so I was engaged in a number of things. I was actually, at the time that I did this strat-op, I was a coach for community care leaders within Willow Creek Church. And I ran that endeavor through that filter. And I was amazed that there were a number of, what you do is you put a green, yellow, or red next to it. And as they say in the plan, if it's red, it's dead. I was amazed to see that there were a number of red spots in there. And that made me take pause going, okay, why, when I'm leading something in which I'm giving back to the kingdom this way, why are these red? And then I started searching my soul on it. And I knew in me that I was imploding in that role. It did not speak to the soul of who I was. Then I threw the Crucible project into it. It was green across the board, which means full go.
Yeah.
And so I knew that the Crucible project was going to be an important part of my future, hence the retirement plan going away. And so I really got engaged with the Crucible project. And over time, what I recognized was anything that is related to, going back to that mission, to transformation in a person's life is what is going to be a part of anything that we engage patronage around. So my wife has a desire and gives to Bible study fellowship, and she brought her leadership into that place. She loves dogs, is engaged with pets. And so therefore, she's focused on guide dogs for the blind. Well, transformation. And so our family is focused on things that are transformative. And so Crucible was that for me. That was the area that I focused on and continue to focus on. And, the way that it looks right now will until the day I die, and there won't be a retirement plan. But you don't need a retirement plan when you're fulfilled. And so my heart is full in regards to what I'm doing with Crucible, and I see the lives that it's changing. And so therefore, I will be a gospel patron of Crucible, not only to the day I die, but beyond, because legacy carries over. And so we have a plan that will carry beyond our lifetimes here.
Which feeds right into your mission statement. Yeah, it's amazing how when you live life on purpose, it's like, well, everything seems connected. It is. It is connected because you take the things that aren't important anymore and realize that those are red and they're dead and it's time to move on. Yeah. And when you really focus in on those things that light you up, you live in this cyclical place of cylinders firing, and, making decisions becomes, I'm assuming, easier because, it's like, well, it either aligns with what I'm about or it doesn't. And if it doesn't, it's an easy no. And then you can keep going forward.
Yeah. And, that actually goes back to what I talked about on the last podcast that I did, which I talked about that meaning and purpose aspect. And so this actually, my work in this area around meaning and purpose goes all the way back to my days in divorce recovery, where I was really starting to unpack what defines meaning and purpose. And I think what I was doing wrong as a young man was that I was always trying to live in a mission purpose mode. But what had not happened is that I had not reconciled what meaning was. And meaning incorporated the whole story of who I was. And I think this is the condition of humanity is that if we go out and we try to live our lives covering up the meaning with something that feels purposeful, and I was doing that in that community care ministry and was imploding in that because I hadn't aligned my story. And my story has some broken elements. And I think a lot of times, and I think this happens a lot with men too, is that if I turn around and create this, I won't have to worry about that.
Mm-hmm.
But going back and reconciling that, what happened in my childhood or, whatever it is, and then embracing it and going, what is the opportunity in the midst of that? Well, the opportunity for me has been emotional intelligence, has been to, transform rather than transfer, as I said, because I was angry. What was I angry about? I needed to find a way to get angry. Our
Mm-hmm.
Christian message a lot of times is you have to find a path to forgiveness. Well, sometimes I have to find a path to anger first so that I can forgive.
Right.
And so by going back and reconciling that and embracing my story, which I couldn't do as a young man, I then could set that into the foundation of meaning. And then I can build purpose on that foundation and get it
Mm.
in the right order. Because I think a false purpose is just going to lead to destruction.
Yeah. Well, that's really impactful. And if anyone's listening and you haven't checked out the previous podcast from Kenny, you can go back on thecrucibleproject.org/podcast, and they're organized by name, so you can just scroll through and find the one that's also labeled Kenny Cox if you want to check out his other interview. If this is lighting up something in you about mission, purpose, and meaning, I would strongly encourage you to check that out as well. So Kenny, how do you begin the process of giving? Let's say somebody's listening and they're like, this sounds great and I want to give, and I want to give with not just because it's a good idea, but because I want it to mean something to me. How do you start that process?
Well, I do think it's important to, first, if you don't have a lot of experience with how to manage your finances, begin the process by surrounding yourself with people who can assist you in that journey. And it might be friends, it might be acquaintances, it may be third parties, but find experts to you that you can trust around this whole element of your life on money management. I forget the scripture in the Message Bible, but I loved it because it says, God made my life complete when I brought all of the parts of myself before him. And the more I looked at that scripture, I thought, okay, finances is a part of this. All of the parts of my life I need to bring before him. And so how do you bring it before him? Well, you start to surround yourself with people who are Jesus to you in human form, that have some level of experience that is greater than yours in this area of finance. And then you start to unpack. You can look at Dave Ramsey's programs or others, and I'm not pushing the Dave Ramsey program, please, but it's a good one. When you look at Debt Snowball and other things that can help you, and start to look at, with this, my expert in my life, how do I get the assistance that I need to set up a sustainable plan that includes giving? And so one of those ways might be to look at initially at a model of 80-10-10. And so, 80% of what I bring into my home is going to go to my needs and wants. 10% is going to go directly into savings. And 10% is then going to go to giving. And so that's something to work towards. And so, and ultimately it's to give from your heart and to know that right now it may be a stretch for me and it may not feel right, but I know based upon my faith that God intends this for good and that there may be something on the other side that I simply won't know until I get there.
Mm.
And so I'm going to work my way up the side of this hill until I can begin to, glare over the top to see the promised land. And knowing that based upon your faith, that God intends blessing for you if there is an obedience to it. And not obedience from a shame standpoint. Forget about the shame. It's just about knowing that something good awaits you. And that is what happened with me, is that giving was painful initially.
Mm.
There's many people who have high net worth and go, I can't give that much. Do you know how much money that would mean? And they're completely missing the sight of the fact that Jesus said that woman who walked in, she gave her all.
Mm-hmm.
And she was in a more blessed place than all those individuals. And so I remember hearing an individual with high net worth at a giving event. speak, and he watched a woman turn around and say, I will give up this for this initiative. And the guy got up and he said, he was in tears, and he said, I thought we were just going to, give, we do okay, and that I wasn't going to feel it. And he said, but she just ruined it for me.
Hmm.
And he realized he was being called to something greater, based upon his net worth.
Mm-hmm.
And then it became painful. But then he spoke about the blessings that came out the other side, and they were great.
Hmm.
And I can share with you that the blessings in my life, by surrounding myself with good people, and I have a number of financial, I have a relationship with a banker who's another financial expert on my team, another Crucible man now too. A big part of my life is Crucible, and I make sure everybody in my life, if they're walking alongside of me, goes on this weekend, and through friendly encouragement, that is. But those individuals have helped me greatly, and in turn, my financial success has grown.
Hmm.
My giving grows, my financial success grows. God has blessed me because I'm getting outside of myself and finding wise counsel in each area of my life, because I'm bringing all parts before him so that he can make my life complete.
Yeah, it's not about the money. My big takeaway from this is that it's not about the money. It's about the posture of the heart and stepping into obedience. And, you were saying people with a high net worth, there might be some people listening who have that high net worth who go 10%. Do you know how much we're talking about here?
Right.
And on the flip side of that, there might be someone listening with, very little who says 10%. Do you know how little that is? Does it even make a difference? And the reality is that, what I'm hearing from your gospel patronage and the idea of being a gospel patron, it's not about how much it is. It's about stepping into that meaning and that mission and bringing that to the Lord.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. There was a little boy who brought 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish in his lunchbox, and what happened with it. And
Right.
so it was multiplied. And I'm guessing that little boy, which we don't read about, had an extremely transformative experience as a result of that. And God multiplied it for good. It wasn't based upon the amount.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think if you bring whatever you bring, and if it feels small to you, then just think about Jesus standing there going, that woman gave her all.
Yeah.
And so she will be blessed as a result of that.
Yeah, I doubt he ever looked at a fish the same way again.
Right, right. Yeah.
Well, Kenny, there's so many worthy causes out there. There's so many things that can light up a person, and it sounds like a lot of it is just figuring out, what is green in your life and what are the red parts. But how do you sift through and decipher where you go all in and what that looks like? How do you figure out where you're going to give, where you're not going to give? How do you make those decisions?
That's a good question, and not one that I think I'm going to figure out the answer, for this podcast. But I will say, when a person unpacking their story, if they do life mapping, I know Sybil Towner has a great life mapping program, starting to figure out what happened at those times in my life that were transformative, and going back, and I feel like when you go back in time and then you start to bring healing around some of those very wounded areas, you start to see yourself and your decision making more clearly. And you start to unpack what's really important to you in life. Doesn't mean you shouldn't, just go ahead and start put together, what am I passionate about list? Do that now. Just start writing that out. Don't think about it and not write it down.
Mm-hmm.
So start your passion list, and then start looking at how do they align with your life story and what's going to be important for you moving forward too.
Yeah, great words of wisdom there. You might not have it all figured out, but that's really helpful. So thanks for sharing that. So we talked a little about how an individual might begin the process of giving, but If you had suggestions of practical tips or practical resources, I know you mentioned life planning and life mapping. Obviously, the book Gospel Patrons by John Reinhardt would be a good read, it sounds like. Do you have other resources that you would point someone toward?
I have one thing that I would encourage people to do, and that is download an app called Compoundee. And so Compoundee for me, I think folks can use for various, I know they can use it for various purposes. The reason that I recommend this is I think when individuals start analyzing where they're spending their money, they can look at what the overall benefit would be to them if they took that money and instead invested it. And so they could see what compounding interest does. As a for instance, I shared before about an individual, a woman who was going to give up stopping by a coffee place. Okay. And so it didn't sound like much, but in the big scheme of things, if you looked at, well, what does a cup of coffee run you if you stop every day? And so it's not just the $6 or $7. If you took that $6 or $7 and you put that into, an interest-bearing account these days is in the fives, but in the normal stock market, even taking into consideration all of the, the Great Depression, and there's an average of over 6% interest. And so when you look at what compounding interest can provide you in your life, simple changes in your life, like dropping that Monster drink or something else, can turn into tens of thousands of dollars in a very short amount of time with compounding interest. Over 20 years, the numbers will absolutely shock you. Mm. And so I think if an individual starts looking at their life and going, instead of financing that, instead of buying that car and financing it, what would that money do if I were able to buy a car for cash and instead bank that money and then look at what compounding interest does? So this little tool that a lot of people haven't been trained in because our schools don't do a good job at really teaching us about compounding interest and how it benefits us can actually change your life. It can change your finances. And it can change the way that you look at giving as a result, because now all of a sudden you've reconciled this financial aspect in your life. Because this world right now is in such a place that everyone knows how to do marketing to get their hands on your money. And so how do you break that cycle and simplify your life so that you have financial peace and so that you in turn are giving from a free heart? So reconcile your finances, use a tool like Compoundee to do that, and then see if that doesn't lead to greater peace in the way that you give moving forward.
Yeah. Well, thanks for that. All right. Well, before I let you get going, is there anything else that you want to share or add on?
Yeah, I think the only thing would be, and I do have that 2 Samuel 21:22 scripture, just to repeat it again, is God made my life complete when I placed all the pieces before him. And so if there's one area of your life that could, transform you in your faith, in your purpose, in being fulfilled, is bring this financial part before God, bring it to those individuals that you can trust, and begin a plan knowing that it doesn't matter what the amount is in which you give, is God will use it in such a way that you will be transformed and you will transform.
Well, thank you for your time today and for sharing parts of your story and the things that excite you. So Kenny, bless you in your journey, and thank you for your involvement with Crucible.
Thanks, Joy. It's been fun.
Thanks.
For more information about our weekends, please go to thecrucibleproject.org. Or if you're ready to get started on your transformational journey right now, you can connect with one of our Crucible certified coaches for a free 30-minute session at thecrucibleproject.org/coaching. That's thecrucibleproject.org/coaching. If you like what you heard, connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Rate and review wherever you are listening, and don't forget to subscribe on your preferred podcast platform. Thank you for listening.